Let's Science is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
3, 2, 1.
We live in a universe of scientific wonders.
Every day, scientists are inching towards breakthroughs which can change our lives.
We're playing our small part in sharing these wonders with you.
That's why today is a fine day for science.
So let's science.
This is a topic that started to be discussed because of some news items that reported all over it. And you're going to help us peer through the haze and get right to the truth of the matter. So I know you've got more context to give, but I'll just throw the question to you and then you can give us the context. Caroline, does paracetamol cause autism?
Well, that is something that I am going to work through, and I'm going to try and provide a nice, clear explanation of why maybe people have thought so and maybe why it doesn't. So I wanted to, this is a touchy topic for some people. And that's really why I wanted to cover it. And also, number one, my eldest son is autistic, okay? Mm-hmm. And also, I have to add, I also know I know other autistic people who are also awesome. We have friends who are parents with children who are autistic. I don't know why.
Teacher, so yes. I encounter students on the spectrum all the time.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. It's not an uncommon condition or to have or way of being. So the other thing is mothers already feel guilty enough when there's something they can't control in pregnancy, and we do our best to make our baby safe and healthy as possible. And if there is a causal link thrown out by somebody, who's in a position of power, it needs to be scientifically and solidly proven. It's not enough for someone in a position of power to just use weak links to prove a point for a particular agenda they may have. The first little bit here is going to be a little political only because it was brought up in the political scene. Okay,
well, this
not
is the
because
source, so we have to address
this is the source. So
yeah.
I'll address this now. So recently, this September in the United States, the FDA recommended, as announced by RFK and President Trump, that Tylenol, as it is branded in the United States, or the chemical name acetaminophen, or here in Australia we call it paracetamol, and it's one of the popular brands is Panadol. The administration have claimed that they finally found the sole cause of this condition. And during a cabinet meeting on October 9th, 2025, Mr. Kennedy reiterated this claim, stating that pregnant people who take Tylenol, unless absolutely necessarily, are being irresponsible. And he even suggested a link between Tylenol given to infant boys after circumcision and autism. I'll just point out here that no mother is going to take a drug, paracetamol, Tylenol, unless it's absolutely necessary in pregnancy. Okay, so there's not being irresponsible. And I just want to note here, to be fair, that just yesterday, at time of recording, he has made a little backtrack. I will say little. He has said that the causative association between Tylenol given in pregnancy and the perinatal periods is not sufficient to say that it is definitely the cause of autism, but it is suggestive. So he's not really walking it back. Okay. So, hey, they brought it up and now I'm going to talk about it. So let's go. So I think we need to separate the topics out a little bit. So firstly, I'm going to call it paracetamol because that's what we call it here in Australia. So I'm referring to Tylenol, acetaminophen. And so let's look at it.
I should point out.
Of course,
because we're pretty clear that we offer an Australian perspective on these issues, right? Because you said, I'm getting a bit political and so on. We're not entering the American political fray. I've got to be pretty clear that this was all over the news in Australia.
It was.
Australian news outlets. They were all talking about it as well. So you can imagine that even the Australian government had to respond.
Yes.
And say, don't listen to this, basically. So,
and a lot of our medical professionals.
Yeah, but we're not answering someone else's problem. We're
No.
addressing something that has made its way here in a really big way as well.
Exactly. And thank you
Over to
for
you.
pointing that out. Yes, no,
Yeah.
it's good that you pointed that out. It's not because I want to talk about American politics. You're right.
Yeah, we have enough politics here.
We have a lot, but it did affect us, and it was a big thing here too. And a lot of medical professionals did have to come out and explain the truth of it as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through this step by step. So firstly, let's look at paracetamol and what is it. So really it's a drug used to treat a variety of common ailments. Its primary uses are for pain relief. So it's effective for mild to moderate pain, including headaches, migraines, not so much migraines, just let me tell you.
Nice.
Yeah, muscle aches, toothaches, etc. It can be used alone, or you can use it with other painkillers such as codeine, etc. for more severe pain. It's also very good for fever reduction. Okay, so it's used when someone has a high temperature, often associated with colds, flu, other illnesses, and infections as well. So the way paracetamol works is that it's believed to work primarily on the central nervous system. What it does, it inhibits co-ox enzymes in the brain. So when the specific enzymes in the brain produce pain and fever signals, cyclooxygenase, those COX enzymes, they're responsible for producing prostaglandins, which are the chemicals in the body that cause pain, inflammation, and fever. So that is how it works in the brain, in the body. Now, it was first discovered or synthesized in 1878 by Harmon Northrop Morse at Johns Hopkins University. It was a long time, though, before its therapeutic properties were fully understood and recognized, and it was first administered to humans in 1893 by Joseph von Mering, but it was overshadowed. There were other drugs at the time, so it wasn't really that common. Yeah. However, in the 1950s, the United States had first appeared commercially, initially as part of a combination drug called Triagesic. Then in 1955, it was launched as a single ingredient product called Tylenol Elixir for Children. And it was only, at that time, it was prescription only. And then 1956, the United Kingdom and Australia marketed the name under the brand Panadol. And just as a cheeky side note, autism was recognized before all of this. So
I was going to ask you that later anyway. Well before. Yeah, sorry.
It started being studied before people were given paracetamol. So that's side note.
No problem.
Bit of a hole there.
Bit of a hole in the theory, yeah.
Exactly. So autism, or autism spectrum disorder, as it's officially called, is a lifelong neurodevelopmental condition. What it means is there is a difference in the way a person's brain is wired and how they process information. It is called a spectrum because of the condition, how it affects people. It affects people in a very wide variety of ways and a big range of symptoms, and people will display it with varying levels of severity. And you'll never find two autistic people that are the same. So everyone is affected differently. It'll be expressed differently in everybody. So the main characteristics of autism fall into two main categories. One is the social communication and interaction. So they may have differences. Autistic people may have differences in how they communicate and interact with others. So it could include difficulty with social cues, making it challenging to understand nonverbal communication like facial expressions, body languages, or tones of voice.
Yep.
Literal interpretation, you might find they're quite literal, so they can take things very literally, like maybe hard to understand sarcasm, idioms, or metaphors. There could be challenges with conversation. They may find it difficult to start or maintain a back and forth conversation, or they might speak with a very different rhythm or tone. And different forms of communication. They may communicate in ways that are not typical, and some autistic people may even be non-verbal. So I know sometimes my son, he'll communicate when we're in a very stressful situation for him and we're out in public, he may just like start making noises because he's just not coping and he's trying to calm himself down. So it's a way of communicating to me that we need to go and find somewhere a bit quiet.
And he's also self-aware enough, and I know that there are quite a few people
he is
self-aware enough to know when he's starting to feel overwhelmed, because at times he's come to me and he said, Uncle Lindsay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Let's have a conversation about something. And then straight away, I'll go to one of his interests, and because he's talking about something he loves, but that's a self-awareness that he has, and I know that a lot of people with autism have as well. And it's good for us to know that, because they're calling to us to help them out a little bit. And it's a beautiful thing, because you have a great conversation at the same time.
Exactly. Autistic people doesn't mean they are, I don't know, not like everyone else. They just think differently. That's it. Correct. They react differently in different situations. Yeah. So, and the second main characteristic is restricted and repetitive behaviors and interests. So they have a need for routine. So they may have a strong need for routine and predictability and can become distressed or anxious if their routine is changed. That's definitely for my son. If I tell him today we're doing this and I decide to throw in this, he's like, but you didn't say we were doing this. So I have to explain why we need to do this as well. Yes. It's really all about communication. Repetitive movements. They might engage in repetitive movements such as hand flapping, rocking, spinning, especially when they're excited, anxious, or overwhelmed. There's no limit to what kind of movements. It's really individual to the person. Intense interest. So you will find this a lot, that they have a focus or deep, highly specialized interests in a particular topic. So at the moment, my son is right into trains. Every weekend we're going to look at trains, we're taking photos, we're doing videos, we're going on trains, different trains. So it's fun. I'm really happy.
I'm so much about it because of him.
I'm learning a lot too. Exactly. So this is an interest I didn't have, but now I'm learning from him, and he's so intelligent about it. He knows everything about it. So and in the future, he wants to work in this field, so it's really going to help him, I think. And then they may have some sensory differences, so they could be hypersensitive or hyposensitive to sensory input like sounds, lights, smells, or textures. Now, it's important to understand that autism is not a disease, it's not an illness, and they're not something that is seek to be cured. Instead, it's a different way of experiencing the world. And many autistic have unique strengths with a strong attention to detail, great memory, or ability to focus intensely on tasks. While some autistic people may need lifelong support, others can live quite independently and successfully. So it doesn't mean that they cannot lead a normal, happy, and productive life, as it has been suggested by certain people in positions of power.
Yes.
So what is the current thinking from many years of research into what causes autism? This has already been looked into scientifically. So let's get into that part.
And let me just jump in as well. So, so you're either listening to this on Catholics of Oz, or you're listening to this as our science segment, which is separate from it. If you're listening to it separately, I just want to point out that we've just spent half an hour or more talking about attention to different people who are on the margins of society for whatever reason. This definitely counts, because, as you just said, if someone implies that they are, what was the phrase you used before about this being a disease or
it's not a disease, it's not an illness to be cured.
Yeah, thank you. And like just anything that seems to imply that they are less than everyone else because they're autistic or whatever. Firstly, that's not an attitude that we endorse. And where people who are autistic have high needs, that is where we are called to help. This is just another thing that should come automatically, not be something like, I'm just going to ignore this because this guy or this woman is socially awkward. No, it's actually we're called to do something to support all kinds of people, including in this sense as well. Back to you, Caroline.
Okay. Thank you for putting that in there.
I was thinking about the document that I just talked about.
Yeah. Very applicable. Yeah. So the current thinking of many years of what could cause autism. Okay. So autism spectrum disorder, they have found that there is no single cause. The scientific consensus is that it is a combination of genetic and environmental factors that work together to influence brain development. So one of the first things that we need to look at are genetics. So genetics play a significant role in the development of autism. The evidence from this comes from several areas. So there have been twin and family studies. So studies of twins have shown a very high concordance rate for autism in identical twins who share almost 100% of their DNA compared to non-identical twins. So it suggests a very strong genetic component. Similarly, if one child in a family has autism, the likelihood of a sibling also having it is significantly higher than in the general population. Gene mutations. So researchers have identified hundreds of genes that are associated with increased likelihood of having autism. Can be categorized as inherited genes. So many of the genes linked to autism can be inherited from a parent. However, it doesn't mean that the parent may have autism themselves. They may simply carry the gene. De novo mutations. So in some cases, a new genetic mutation can occur spontaneously in the child, which is not present in either parent. So it's a new mutation that can also increase the likelihood of having autism. Known genetic conditions, sometimes they are a co-occurring condition that can occur with other genetic syndromes such as Fragile X syndrome, tuberous sclerosis, and Rett syndrome. Then there are environmental factors. So genetics are crucial, but environmental factors can also play a role. These factors are not thought to be a single cause, but influences that can increase the likelihood of having autism. They are typically related to the prenatal period and the time immediately surrounding birth. So some environmental factors can be advanced parental age. So children born to older parents, both the mother and father, have been shown to have a slightly higher likelihood of autism. There is thought to be partly due to increased chance of new genetic mutations. Maternal health conditions, so the mother's health during pregnancy can be a contributing factor, such as gestational diabetes, which I did have with both of my children, and you feel bad enough for that. When you have gestational diabetes, you have to control it very carefully. Obesity and viral or bacterial infections that can cause fever or inflammation. Complications during birth, factors such as low birth weight, extreme prematurity, or lack of oxygen to the baby's brain during delivery has been linked to a higher risk. And then there's exposure to certain substances, and the research is still going on with this. So exposure to substances such as some medications, environmental toxins like air pollution, and some pesticides. So that is what we do know. Now,
and it's complex enough as it, isn't it?
It's very complex.
Yeah.
Now, there have been studies into paracetamol itself, so let's have a look at these. Now, these have been observational studies that have suggested a link between paracetamol and the use of it during pregnancy and its cause of it causing autism. So, okay, the first one you might have heard about in the news is the Mount Sinai Systematic Review was It was published in BMC Environmental Health in August 2025. And from memory, I think it might have been this I don't know what you call it, announcement was based on, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it was based on. So this was a review performed on 46 observational studies that looked into the use of paracetamol during pregnancy. So the methodology was that a systematic review and a meta-analysis using the navigation guide methodology was used to look at the quality of evidence and the risk of bias for each of 46 studies that were reviewed. Now, the key finding was that the review found that a majority of the observational studies showed a statistical association with ASD, or autism spectrum disorder. There have been other studies that were cited for evidence of a potential link. So there's the Norwegian mother, father, and child cohort study. So this was done in 2017 and published in the journal Pediatrics. They used data from the Norwegian Mother, Father and Child Cohort Study, which tracked over 100,000 children and their parents. The methodology was that researchers collected self-reported data on paracetamol use from mothers during pregnancy, then followed the children and analysed their neurodevelopmental outcomes at age 3 and 5. The claimed conclusion was that the study found a statistical association between mothers who used paracetamol for 29 days or more during pregnancy and a higher risk of their children being diagnosed with neurodevelopmental disorders, including autism. The risk increased with duration of use, and the authors concluded that the findings strengthened the belief of paracetamol exposure in utero is a contributing factor of some neurodevelopmental disorders. However, they also acknowledged that the observational nature of the study and stated that a causal link could not be proven. So it wasn't caused, like they still couldn't say paracetamol caused autism.
Is it, in layman's terms, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the conclusion of these studies we might have a lead, even if the lead is explored further later on down the track and finds out that there's actually nothing in it, but there's like this thing that we found that looks like there's a commonality that needs more exploration? Like, were they saying definitively, here it is, here's the cause? Or
no, they were not saying definitively.
Like, statistically, it looks like there's a high correlation between this activity and this result. And this might be a lead that needs to be explored further. I
think that's all you can really conclude. Yeah.
Is that a fair analysis of what you've just said, though?
Yeah, I think that's all you can really conclude from that. And then I'll explain a little further as well why maybe it's not completely correct. So there was a Danish national birth cohort study. So there's another study that was done. This study was published in 2014 in the journal JMA, yes, Pediatrics, and used data from the Danish national birth cohort. So researchers looked at over 64,000 children and their mothers, collecting data on paracetamol during pregnancy. Their conclusion was that the study found children whose mothers had used paracetamol during pregnancy had a slightly higher risk of receiving a diagnosis of a form of ADHD in their children. So again, they use the term associated rather than caused, so highlighting that the findings were a statistical correlation. So really, the conclusion was that they found statistical association between paracetamol use and neurodevelopmental disorders. They did not prove that paracetamol directly caused autism. Now, I have to point out, this is why I wanted to, not completely answer the question, is because there were limitations to these studies, and these were identified by the researchers themselves that also had an effect on how we interpret the conclusions. So the limitations were, number one, it's called confounding. So this is the underlying reason a pregnant person would take paracetamol in the first place. So they would have a high fever, a chronic illness, or an infection. Like I mentioned before, this could be the true cause of the increased risk of autism itself and not the drug itself. The data was self-reported, so it was based on a mother's memory, which could be inaccurate. There was a lack of dose information as well. So many studies didn't have precise data on the exact dose or frequency of paracetamol use. So when addressing this confounding problem, it says, so there was actually a study that looked into this. So this, like I mentioned, was the underlying reason for someone taking the drug in the first place. So one study looked at this in detail. It was published in April 2024, titled Acetaminophen Use During Pregnancy and Children's Risk of Autism, ADHD and Intellectual Disability. It was published in the Journal of American Medical Association, and it was a large sibling-controlled study, and seemed to solve this confounding problem. So it was like a natural experiment that takes place within the same family. By comparing an autistic child to their sibling who does not have autism, the researchers effectively controlled for all shared familial factors. So this is what they found. And they also found there was no increase in autism risk after all. So how they did that? They controlled for genetics. So autism is highly heritable, and significant portion of it is caused genetically. By comparing siblings, the study effectively cancelled out the family's shared genetic predisposition to autism. If a family has a gene or genes that increase the risk of autism, both children share those genes. Therefore, any difference in outcome between them must be due to something other than genetics. So then they controlled for a shared environmental factors. So the two siblings share the same prenatal and postnatal environment in the vast majority of cases. This includes the same maternal health history, socio-economical status, diet, home environment, and exposure to other environmental toxins. So then paracetamol was no longer a marker of risk. In the sibling-controlled analysis, when children were compared, the fact that one was exposed to paracetamol and the other was not did not change the outcome. This showed that the paracetamol itself was not the cause. Instead, the association seen in earlier studies was likely a statistical illusion created by unmeasured factors such as the mother's chronic illness or pre-existing condition that are shared by all children within the family. So in short, the sibling control study did not find increased incidence of autism because it was proved that the initial statistical link was not what it was made out to be. It showed that the real risk factors were not the paracetamol, but rather the underlying genetic and environmental predispositions that were present in the family and which were common to both the autistic and non-autistic siblings. And from the paper, the official conclusion published was acetaminophen, or paracetamol as I've been calling it, used during pregnancy was not associated with children's risk of autism, ADHD, or intellectual disability in sibling-controlled analysis. This suggests that associations observed in other models may have been attributed to familial confounding. So, in conclusion, we can't really say that paracetamol is the sole cause of autism, as was announced by the FDA in America. So, I know we're going a bit long, but I want to cover this quickly. I want to take a minute to explain what else does not cause autism, okay? Because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think we should really mention it quickly. So, vaccines. Numerous large-scale scientific studies have definitively shown that there is no link between vaccines and autism. I know you can hear that I'm passionate about this, but I feel we need to talk about it. The original studies...
proven again and again. I know that's...
Exactly. And I feel like I have to say it here too. Yeah. So the original study that was suggested a link was retracted and the author was found to have acted unethically. Studies have been done to compare children that have been vaccinated with those that haven't been vaccinated, and the rate of autism in both groups was exactly the same. If there was a link between the two, you would expect that the group of kids that had the vaccine would show a higher rate in autism in that group. Also, parenting style. There's no way you can parent that will cause your child to have autism. Yes. So it's a really outdated and harmful theory. It's been completely debunked by the medical and scientific community. So as we mentioned, it's a complex condition and no one knows the cause. So we know that it's not solely caused by one drug. We know it's not caused by vaccines. If anything, please, my message to you is get your children vaccinated. You'll save them from uncomfortable disease and even in the worst cases, death. We know that we've seen a rise in disease in children at the moment. So please just get your children vaccinated. Also, finally, I want to say here that people with autism deserve dignity, love, a full life, just like anyone else. They aren't to be used for political gains. Neurodiversity is beautiful. We all know people who don't think the same way as we do, and we love them all. We're all for it, and society benefits from people who think differently. It would be boring if we were all the same. So there we go.
Well said. Well done to all the parents who put in those extra miles for their children who are on the spectrum for whatever reason that might be. But those parents are just beautiful heroes who love their children, and well done to them for doing that too. So I was reflecting on some of the things that obviously I don't have a scientific background like you do, right? You've got so you can interpret the scientific literature, which is really good that we have you to be able to do that. And from a layman's perspective, I was thinking of some other things that were interesting, like RFK Jr. I just did a quick Google search because I was curious now. It doesn't have a medical degree or even a scientific degree. And so what motivates a person or group of people to take particular studies and use those studies as proof, but then ignore other studies and which cancel out those studies? So, for example, studies that show that vaccines don't cause autism because it was investigated because it became a big thing, or studies that show that Tylenol or paracetamol don't cause autism. So this has also been debunked. But why is that message ignored and other scientific studies used if they haven't, especially if those studies haven't conclusively proven that there was a link between those things? Why do people go to those and ignore others?
It's a hard one. And it's probably, well, my theory is that it's out of fear. You have something in your child and you don't know what it is, and then someone gives you a quick answer and you're like, oh, that's what it is. But we can't do that. We need to investigate. There have been studies on these things, and it's on us to investigate this and really look for the truth.
And we've seen consequences. So last year, we did a podcast on violence, gospel word for a violent world. Where am I going with this, right? So one of the things that increases violence and suffering in the world is the spread of misinformation and disinformation. So the misinformation being information that we share that's false, but we don't know it's false. We might think of it as true. Think of like an AI video of something happening and you think it's real, so you share it, right? Or disinformation, which is the creation of false information and sharing it as if it were true to convince and manipulate people and so on. And you can see the harmful effects of this kind of, whether it's misinformation or disinformation, I'll let people decide for themselves, right? Depends who's sharing it and their motivations. But for example, we hear, and again, we shouldn't even know about it, but we hear about the rising rates of measles in the United States. We've seen in Australia, there have been cases of measles here. And in fact, while my wife was pregnant, I was checking because the alerts for where cases of measles have been. So, for example, there were on 2 occasions people with measles in the shopping centre that we go to. So I had to tell my wife, I'm sorry, but for a little while you're going to need to avoid going there. Because we just can't risk it. She's pregnant. We can't risk her getting measles.
And measles, the reason is because measles can have a detrimental effect on the developing child. And you do not want anything harmful to happen to your child. So it's very responsible that you did that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is known in Australia, it's been reported that anti-vaccine sentiment has been on the rise because people have sadly been convinced that vaccines do this and vaccines do that. All these harmful things that have been debunked. When what we do know is that if enough people get vaccinated, there are no expressions or there are less expressions of the disease. We've talked about how do we say we've wiped out measles, now suddenly they're back? You know what I mean?
It's back.
We've wiped this out and suddenly it's back, whatever. It shouldn't be back. And there are reasons why people can't get vaccines. We know that. And that's why the rest of us get vaccines so that these people are also protected as well. So
exactly.
So we have to be careful about this misinformation and disinformation. If you are watching TV and you're like, I don't know what the truth is now. And I get the confusion, right? You see a person come up behind a podium, they look official and they say, this causes autism, this causes that. Again, what I would say to you is don't go to Dr. Google or Dr. ChatGPT. That might be helpful, but sometimes that can be worse. What I would say is go to your local GP and have a conversation with them. All right. I saw on the news that paracetamol or Tylenol, whatever you want to call it, causes autism. Is this true? Let your doctor explain it to you, because your doctor should be someone you can trust. Or my child is meant to be getting vaccinated for whatever it is, but I'm afraid of my child getting autism. Talk to your doctor and they'll explain to you why this is not the case. People will sometimes throw out anecdotes of vaccine injuries and so on. Yes, those things are real, but they are also not reasons to not vaccinate either. Sometimes people associate a vaccine with an injury, but it's not the case with this person. Sometimes you might get something within a week of getting a vaccine or whatever, but that's not necessarily a cause, but people will say automatically that it is, and they'll share that kind of misinformation online as well. So talk to your GP. Don't listen to your best friend's anecdote or that
social media
story that you saw. My goodness, during the pandemic, like people were sharing like wildfire a story about a father who lost a son after he got the COVID vaccine. And people were sharing it like crazy. I knew there was something sus about it. I was searching the news. I searched everywhere to try and find any evidence of this story. I couldn't find anything except this Facebook post. And then, yes, it was debunked not a week or two after it had come out. But the damage had already been done because people responded to it in the comments and saying, see, I told you we shouldn't get the vaccine, things like that. Be careful where you get your information from. And like I said, if you're really unsure, go to your GP. Just go to your doctor and talk to them. Because they'll be able to tell you, they're qualified, you know what I mean? They're doctors that they can help you out with that, unless they're a crank. But there's not many of those around. So it's okay too. That was so informative, Caroline. And thank you for, I know you spent hours and hours pouring through because we didn't want to come across as preferencing a political side. We just wanted to share the truth about this topic. So you put in the hours and the legwork of going through studies and doing the research so that we could share the truthful message about this topic. Is there anything you wanted to add to conclude there, Dr. Caroline?
No, I just, not a doctor. I just wanted to just share the truth of it, really. And I hope I've done that in a clear and concise way. I've tried to go through it and in a way that everyone can understand. And I'm happy for people to disagree with me. That is fine. But this is what I found in my research because I wanted to know the truth as well. And I just wanted to present it to everyone.
And I want to point out, if you do disagree, which we don't mind, and if you contact us about it, you need to address what Caroline said, not share an anecdote with us because we're not very favorable to that kind of, but my friend had this or my friend had that. Caroline just shared a whole trove of science, a whole heap of it. That's what we would like you to address if you disagree, not share a story that has nothing to do with what Caroline said, please. Just saying that nicely because we love you all.
Yes, we do.
Because this is a very long episode, but worth it. It's been a while anyway, so we've got to get a lot of things off our chest.
Catching up.
So that's it.
Let's Science is brought to you by StarQuest Media and is a fortnightly podcast that brings you the scientific wonders of our universe from a distinctly Catholic point of view. For more from Caroline, Lindsay, and friends, listen to the StarQuest show, Catholics of Oz. Find links from today's show at sqpn.com/science. And find the Catholics of Oz at sqpn.com/Oz. Be sure to follow the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you can find podcasts, or on the SQPN YouTube channel. The generous donations of our patrons at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Let's Science and all the shows at StarQuest, which makes our nonprofit mission possible. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Join us next time for more scientific wonders, and thank you for listening to Let's Science on StarQuest. Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy, The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.